2024, and then Recycling Market Development Board meeting to order. This time we have some information with regard to our Zoom connection. Deanna?
Correct. And I called it Zoom earlier, but of course we're on Teams now. So let's go ahead and do the housekeeping. Thank you for joining us today. I am Deanna Garner, Recycling Market Development Program Manager for Items Office of Program Support. All microphones should currently be muted. For attendance tracking, please take a moment to write your name and affiliation in the chat box. We will be taking questions and comments from participants at today's meetings. All participants will be able to unmute themselves and ask questions or make comments at the appropriate times when called upon. If you have a question or technical issue during the presentation, please use the raise hand or chat features. If any members of the media have joined us, please utilize the chat feature or email media@idem.in.gov if you have any questions or would like to schedule an interview. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website at recycle.in.gov. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Bruce.
With that, next order of business. Consideration and approval of the April 25th RMDB meeting summary. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the summary? Any adjustments, corrections? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Lutz. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Hackman. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
This is Microsoft.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next order of business, item Office of Program Support update. Carl, are you going to give that?
Yeah.
Morning, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I can't be there in person today. Just a few updates, and I'll keep it rather brief. Some additional staffing updates. Our Education and Outreach Coordinator for the agency, which is a position that resides in our office. She was promoted into a section chief position a couple months ago. So just recently here we had Stephanie Shucks start in that role 2 weeks ago. So we're excited to have that position filled. It's a very important position for our office, especially right now as we're getting ready to participate in State Fair and have a presence in the DNR building at the State Fair this summer again. So we're excited to have that position filled, and I think Stephanie is going to be really great asset to the office in that role. Additionally, we've had some additional vacancies that we filled in our compliance and technical assistance program staff. So now we are back to being fully staffed in our CTAP program, which is great. I'm not 100% sure if it's published yet on our website, but we have updated our CTAP staff map. So if you or anybody you know needs some compliance and technical assistance from that program, from those staff members, it's not yet there, it's forthcoming to show you the county assignments for each of those staff members. So a few of those newer staff people since our last meeting, I believe Samantha Nunnery is new since our last meeting. She's filling the role of our Small Business Regulatory Coordinator, which is a part of our CTAP staff. And then we had our Northwest Regional Office CTAP staff person was promoted into the director position for that Valparaiso office. So we had to fill that position. So we just recently hired a month ago, Mallory Medlin. She comes to us with about 11 years of environmental legal experience. So she has a law degree and is an attorney and practiced environmental law out of Chicago, and wanted to come and work for the state of Indiana for IDEM. So we're really excited to have that kind of knowledge and expertise on the team. And then our Southwest Regional Office CTAP staff person took a promotion in our Office of Water Quality for a data position. So we hired back into CTAP our Tammy Hogg, who has been in our Office of Air Quality for the last 5 or 6 years, I believe, as a compliance inspector for Office of Air Quality. So she brings a lot of air quality experience and knowledge, as well as multimedia experience from her prior work before she worked at IDEM. And she was in CTAP once before for about 4 years. So she kind of did a boomerang from the Office of Water Quality back to OPS. So we're really excited to have those folks on staff. And then some of you may have known Karen Taliha. She left our agency back in March. So we finally have that position filled, and now it's back to being a full-time position. So Katia Drake is filling that role. We hired her from the Hoosier Environmental Council. So we're really excited to have her on board. And then I know Pat's happy to also have a full staff right now, knock on wood. So we were able to fill a quality assurance staff position on her team with April Jett. So we're really excited to have her on board as well. So she doesn't have a lot of environmental experience, but she does have quality assurance experience and knowledge from the healthcare industry. So we're excited to have her on board as well. My only other real update is that we are moving forward with an agency modernization project. So we're hoping to have upwards of $5 million investment over the next several years from Budget Committee and the State Budget Agency for some improvements to our information technology systems for the agency to, allow us as an agency to do our job more efficiently without having to, add additional staff. Hopefully that will result in a lot of improved efficiencies across the board in IDEM. We're currently doing discovery work for that and working on a scope of work. A contractor has been selected through an RFI, request for information process. So that's all wheels in motion for that. So I think those are the only real significant updates I have. And anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Well, thank you very much, Carl, for that overview. I appreciate you making the time to attend our meeting.
Yes, definitely.
All right, the next on the agenda is RMDP grants update. Ms. Deanna Gardner.
Yep. Hi, good morning. Status update of our existing grants. So for fiscal year 24, all have been executed and are moving forward. Some have already started purchasing equipment and submitting reimbursements. We really haven't had any movement since our last board meeting. So we do have one fiscal year 23 grant that's still ongoing, Petoskey Plastics. It was renewed for 6 months. So they're on track to finish. And then we have the one fiscal year 22 grant with +5, which is now called Revive Indiana, that was renewed for the full length of the year. And they just submitted their status report and are moving on track as well with their projects. So I can go ahead and move on to the next update. Overview of our fiscal year 25 grant applications. Those were accepted May through mid-June, and we received a total of 17 eligible applications. Only 2 were ineligible, totaling over $4.7 million in requested funding, with close to $12 million in total project costs. So if the boards were able to fund all the projects as well, an estimated additional 100 and almost 26,000 tons of materials would be diverted from final disposal. So I did send a summary, hopefully to you guys, that you were able to see in the email. We had a lot of good projects from some MRF improvements to waste tire recycling, education, outreach, recycling receptacles at major like universities, to even a mobile e-waste recycling truck. So I think it's gonna be a good year. Of note, though, I did want to bring this up to the board, that 8 applicants that have received past funding reapplied this year. And 2 additional applicants that applied last year but did not receive funding also applied. So we do have a lot of repeat customers. So we will be looking into ways we can expand our outreach to and get new people interested. We are looking hopefully at the next year's fiscal budget and hoping that there may be an increase and allow us to maybe even afford a little bit more funding next year. It's based on our budget. We'll have to wait and see, but we hope. As far as those fiscal year 25 as well, CTAP, our compliance and technical assistance program, they are doing their compliance checks starting next week. They have about 6 weeks to go and do a site visit, make sure these facilities are compliant. Then I will have the proposals and score sheets to the board by August 28th for your guys' scoring. And then they'll be due September 25th. So then you guys will have about a month. I'll be able to compile those in about a week. And then you guys will have a month of the compiled results to look at and review before the board meeting in October. Any questions about those or comments?
I believe so. Thank you, Deanna. That's good. I'm glad to see a lot of applicants there. Obviously, we always have more than we have money for. Yeah, I guess we'll just do our best to try to allocate it as best possible.
Yeah, we have a wide variety of asks too. We got quite a few that asked for the full 500,000 and a few that were towards the lower end on the 50,000 range, so.
Good. Now, are you going to give us an update on the
I
Central
can.
Indiana Waste Diversion Program?
I can keep talking, yeah. Next update for the Central Indiana Waste Diversion Program. Not too much to update except for that the round did open July 1st. Applications are available on our website for those to apply. And as it's said in the statute, that actually round is open until October 1st. And just a reminder of the rest of the schedule, after October 1st, IDEM has until December 1st to review them, do compliance checks, and then get the recommendations to the board by, what did I say? IDEM has till December 1st to get those to the board. And then the board will be awarding funding hopefully in the first meeting of the next year in 2025.
Deanna, when will the board seats, one of our terms over?
Technically, your terms are over now. So we've expressed that you guys are wanting to stay and we're just kind of waiting to hear.
So we'll know, obviously, prior to that vote, whether we are
Yeah, I hope
welcome
so,
or
yeah.
whether we're released from duty.
Hopefully they like the work that you guys have been doing and we can keep the board as is, so.
Thank you.
The next update is mine as well, if you want me to keep moving.
What's the dollar amount now? I know
Yes,
it's
yeah.
fluctuated just to confirm.
Right, so it's 3.7 million. Yeah, and I don't have this on here, but I could bring it up as well. We usually like to give updates on our SWIFR funding from EPA, the solid waste infrastructure for recycling grant that we received. That is moving forward. We did put out bids for a contractor to create the materials management plan for Indiana. And it has been awarded. has been public, so you know me, if you're in the rice industry, you may be familiar with them. They're a pretty big research and consulting firm, won the bid, and we are working on their contract now. So, hopefully work get started in the next couple months. So then my last update. I had you guys think about this time last year. I went back to get the updates and get it live on our website, and we lost our support. The people who were supporting it and doing the updates were no longer able to assist us on that project, so it got delayed a little bit. But we have, with new staff in OPS and additional support, we're now able to bring that project back up. And within the next couple of days, the request has been put in, it just hasn't been made live yet. That map will go onto our recycle.in.gov page, and I just wanted to preview and show it again if I can find it. Share my screen. So this is the map that I am referring to. And this is all the recycling grants. This includes Central Indiana Waste Diversion. In the community recycling grants, one of the tweaks that we will make is to probably do, and maybe they already did it. If we can, they did. So you can see that Central Indiana ones are green in color. So you got the IMS and the Republic, like this came up, the Republic Polymer. So when you click on the dot, it gives you additional information, the entity type, project type, fiscal year, and award amount, and address.
That's available where, Deanna?
So it's gonna be at recycle.in.gov, our main recycle page. Here's a preview of it, and currently you'll see it looks like this, but on this far right, this one that says partnerships and recognitions programs is gonna change. There's gonna be a widget for the map, and you'll be able to click right there, and it'll take you to the dashboard. So you can filter by county, see what projects happen in your county, filter by entity type, fiscal year, program. So it's a nice kind of overview of if you're looking at what has been funded in the past and looking for what might be funded in the future, to be able to go here and have a nice overview.
The one thing I get from this map, it's comforting to know that we've touched about every quadrant of the state, with, projects and funding. So, I mean, looks like the southeast may be the thinnest. But I have to get Sandy working on that. And any other comments about the map? Yeah, I really like it.
This is
Yes.
Carl. I was just going to add one quick thing that's nice about the way that we got this map set up is that when our staff in these programs update, annually the data behind the map, it will automatically update. So we won't have to ask somebody to update the map. It's actually like a live, constantly updating map over time. So that'll be a nice thing to reduce aggravation for sure.
Definitely.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Did we get the layer done for the legislators? So they can see if their districts?
So, yeah, so there is layers for the Senate and House districts. It does, originally, we were able to have a layer that actually listed the names of those in that Senate and House districts, but we weren't able to find an updated layer that has the actual names. So it just will tell you what district and what it is by number or how it's designated, but not like who is your representative. And I have requested that we look into try and find that and get that.
We thought it would be useful for the legislators.
Yeah,
The ones
yeah.
that we have on the board.
Yeah.
I think the map's great. Anything that we can do to get more information to the general public on where we're going and the results that we've had is wonderful. I believe the next item is the let's see. Number 5, Deanna,
We are.
emerging material management trends.
So we went ahead and, the board requested maybe having a few presenters on topics that are coming out in the recycling and waste industry currently. So I was able to, round up about 3 presentations for you guys today, and we're gonna try to keep them around 20-minute presentations with 10 minutes, Q&A. They are gonna be, virtual. So, I can introduce, hopefully, let's see here. Yep, Matt James is on here from Recycling Partnership. I invited the Recycling Partnership to come and kind of discuss their efforts across the country, but more specifically in Indiana and regionally. This kind of came about, one reason was that Tom and I were doing some of the site visits of our own grantees to come and find out that those grantees also had Recycling Partnership grants given to them as well. And we thought, what's the opportunities there to be more collaborative on our efforts in the state? So Matt, I'll give you the floor. You can introduce yourself and did we give them permission to share?
Should have.
Okay, hopefully you have permissions to share.
Great. Well, it's nice to meet everybody virtually. And Deanna, thank you for the invitation. I know Deanna from our group we run called the State Recycling Leaders Group. Deanna comes a lot to that and meets with other state leaders across the country and chats about hot topics in recycling. So Deanna, nice to see you again. And thanks for the invitation today. So I'll share my screen real quick. Okay. I believe you can all probably see my slide deck now. Let me know if you can't. But my name is Matt James. I am a grant developer for the Recycling Partnership. And the Recycling Partnership is a national nonprofit that is focused on improving the circular economy from all aspects of the recycling industry. From manufacturers, we work with them to make their products more recyclable, and we work with their packaging specialists to make sure that what they create can wind up in a curbside cart. We work with brands, the lawmakers, both statewide and nationally. And on my team, we work with communities to provide them recycling education and resources and grant funding, most importantly, to make their recycling programs work more effectively. We are backed by most of the largest packaging companies in the country, from Target, Walmart, to American Beverage, who represents Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And they give us funding to then go out and make grants with communities. So we appreciate their support. So back in January, we released our State of Recycling report, which showed about the recycling rate across the entire country for each state. And so you can see in Indiana, we estimate about 17% of recycling is captured, which is pretty good considering there's a lot of states that are in that red, like in the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama have very low recycling rates, and some of the other Midwest states are far below. But we believe that number can come up, and I'm going to talk a few ways that we think it can. In terms of raw tonnage being lost, we estimate about 850,000 tons of recyclables are lost every year in Indiana. You'll see some of the larger population centers like Texas and California are losing over 3 million tons, but we think this is pretty accurate. We've done a lot of survey work and estimations based on acceptability of recycling. So common challenges that most states face are they have limited access to recycling, whether that's curbside or drop off. When folks don't have a curbside cart in front of their house, the amount of material that can actually be recovered plummets. Curbside is the best and most effective way to recycle because it's just flat out more convenient. So a lot of communities lack the infrastructure to make that happen. They don't have the fleet, they don't have the carts necessary to go out and collect from curbside. And then lastly, a major issue since 2017 when overseas markets became a lot more stringent on the recycling quality that they were willing to accept on their ports. Contamination has become a hot button issue. We can no longer send mixed plastics and mixed paper to China or Thailand or India if they don't have very strong quality. So we have to make sure that our materials are very clean. And so contamination has become a chief concern for most material recovery facilities. So ways we believe to make the right investment to overcome those challenges are we've created this spectrum here. At the left end, you'll see drop-off access. That's the first foray into the recycling economy. It's very simple to do. It's easy, but it's going to also recover the least amount of tonnage. If you just have drop-off access where residents have to drive 5 miles to bring their recyclables, we think you can capture about 50 pounds a household, which is better than 0 pounds a household. But as you move to the right on this spectrum here, you see if we use curbside with an opt-in program, we think about 100 pounds per household. So that opt-in, people can choose to pay a little bit more to do recycling. Curbside and bins, we think you could maybe do about 200 pounds a household. And once you introduce carts, they're bigger, they are more efficient. 96-gallon carts are the new industry standard for collection because not only can they hold more material, you can also use semi-automated or automated trucks to actually collect with that arm that reaches out and grabs the cart. So we think 400 pounds per household. And then on this right end with curbside carts, good education, and policy, we believe that you can capture up to about 600 pounds a household with only 200 pounds of recyclables being lost to the landfill every year. So this is our guiding principle on how we make grants. With drop-off access on the left, we have a drop-off grant program. And on the right, we have a very strong curbside recycling grant program that's been in effect for 10 years now. So when we are trying to make grants, we are very strategic. We want to do curbside carts with education to produce more access, drop-off sites for those more rural communities that don't have the route density that a curbside program would have, multifamily access. There are more apartment dwellers in this country than ever. I think 40 million or something like that households are apartment households. MRF improvements, so material recovery facilities, we've started to invest in them to make sure that they can capture more material and specifically more types of material like extra plastics that weren't able to collect before. And then optimization and contamination reduction, that's when a program's already in place. We provide grant funding to make sure that it is operating most efficiently. So reducing the contamination and making sure that all the materials that are recyclable or can be recycled are recycled. And lastly, we even make grants to recover data. Our priorities with any of our grants are going to be new access, meaning more households being brought into the recycling system, more households that are gaining recycling access. And then second is new tons. So new tons being if a city was collecting 100 tons in 2023 and we provide them a grant, by 2024 we hope that they're collecting 200 tons. So these are the two metrics that we have our own internal scoreboard for, that we take to our funders to say, with our grant program, we brought in 100,000 new households that are gaining access, or with our grant programs, we've gained 50,000 more tons of recycling with this amount spent. So these are our main priorities. So whenever a grantee or an applicant submits a proposal to us, I always tell them, to focus on these two items. How can our grant funding be used to gain more recycling access and improve the collection rate? So our bread and butter program that has been in effect since 2014, when we were first started, is our CART grant. We have an RFP for that. It is available on a year-round basis, and there are no deadlines for funding. So if a community needs funding 6 months from now, they should absolutely apply. If they need funding a year from now, they should apply it to us in a few months. Our grant works like this. You submit a proposal to us, and then if we think it's strong enough, we'll take it to our funders, get approval, and then we will fund $15 per cart, which is usually about a quarter of the cost of each cart, and then $1 per education. So that $1 per household for education will pay for the printing and mailing of a new recycling education material that goes out to say, we want your bottles, cans, paper, plastic, cardboard in this cart on these days to put at the curb. And then a top issue mailer that says, hey, maybe don't put your plastic bags in this cart, or we don't want organic material in the curbside cart. We like to alert folks that carts are coming, so they'll get a mailer that says, hey, on October 20th of 2024, you're going to see some workers dropping off a cart at your household. Be prepared to recycle these items. So these are things that we pay for our cart grant. So the $15 per cart and then $1 per household for education. Of course, there are in-kind benefits to our cart grants as well. So we provide technical assistance on procuring carts, on how to run a cart program, on how to collect, on how to design education and outreach material. We've done this grant in about, I think, 350-ish communities across the country, as large as Kansas City and Baltimore, to communities like Valparaiso or Lawrenceburg in Indiana. So we've found what works on education outreach, and we're happy to help design those materials if needed. And then with every grant that goes out, you are also assigned a grant manager from the Recycling Partnership, someone on our team who works on the grant implementation team to work with that community on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to make sure that everything's going according to plan. That's at no extra cost. That's just an extra benefit to our CART grant. Maybe even the most valuable thing about our CART grant is the expertise that our implementation team brings to a community to help them implement recycling. So in Lawrenceburg, I believe we had a grant with them in 2021 to put out a couple thousand new carts. I believe 1,500 actually new carts. $25,000 grant for the carts. So relatively inexpensive grant-wise, but still got deployed, and a grant manager helped see that through. And in 2017, we had a grant with Valparaiso for, I think, just about $12,000 to do bins and carts and education material. And Lawrenceburg, they actually had a bin-based collection, so little, I think 18-gallon bins that we then purchased 96-gallon carts for them to use, so that instead of collecting bins once a week, they could collect from carts twice a month.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to also comment on the Valparaiso one. The Recycling Market Development Board did fund the other part of that funding. So it was a recycling market development grant that they used the Recycling Partnership for matching dollars on that project as well.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So I believe I'm going to touch on two more that are co-granting with the board and the partnership. The Valparaiso was one of them. Yeah. So on that note, we would love to do more co-granting. That's great. We do granting with state agencies, most notably in Michigan. We've done a lot of work with Eagle. We do work with the Ohio EPA, Alabama ADEM. We'd love to do more co-granting like we did in Valparaiso, Muncie, and DEC, which I'll mention here in a second. But thanks for that note. In addition to CART grants, we've recently got into drop-off granting. So drop-off granting, when carts aren't feasible, the route may not have the density, houses may be too far apart in rural areas, we are more than happy to grant new access through drop-off granting. Our top priority would be doing big regional investment called hub and spoke model granting, where we help fund a transfer station to actually collect the spoke drop-off centers and aggregate them before they're shipped to a market. But we can also do smaller grants just to set up new drop-off sites. For instance, we've purchased compactors like the one pictured there on the left, the stationary compactor. You can put a lot more material in a compactor before it needs to be hauled. I think about 5 tons compared to 1 or 2 tons with just an open top roll off that's loose. So we really like compactors. And then, of course, always funding education and outreach. So that maybe look like a mailer that goes out to every household in a 5 mile radius of the drop off site. And then, of course, the signage that actually tells people we want your bottles, cans, paper, plastic, cardboard to be put in this hopper or it's going to be squished into this compactor. And over here on the right, you'll see 2 transfer stations. We didn't actually fund these. These are in Chatham County, North Carolina, but these are really good examples of what we'd like to do. So this transfer station is fed by a dozen drop-off sites, like the one on the left. The material is aggregated under that dome. It's pushed into that hopper there on the bottom right with a skid steer, and then it's hauled away 2 counties away to a MRF. This is a great model because instead of hauling piecemeal, you get really a good economy of scale when you're hauling things in bulk. So that's why a transfer station works, and our grant is available to pay for that. I don't believe we've funded any drop-off grants in Indiana yet. We'd love to. I've been in talks with a few counties. I believe Allen County was one I was speaking with about potential grant funding maybe a year ago. And if anyone knows any opportunities, please reach out to me. Another relatively new grant program that we run is our multifamily grant. We actually are about to release an RFP in a few months, but we're willing to pay for the collection equipment, the education, or even the service provision for, say, valet service recycling at apartment units. There's really low recycling rates coming out of apartments for a number of reasons. One, there's a high turnover rate between residents, so they bring in different expectations for what should be recyclable. There's often folks that speak a different first language other than English, and maybe you're not getting the education materials that they need. And frankly, a lot of property managers just have so many other priorities ahead of recycling, and you basically need to dedicate a few parking spaces in their parking lots for recycling. So we're even willing to work with property managers to pay for recycling corrals or carts or dumpsters to make recycling work on site. And happy to share out that RFP when it comes. But right now, I'm willing to meet with any community that wants to talk about multifamily granting to kind of design it kind of on a more ad hoc basis. And then we also are doing engagement grants. So when a community already has curbside recycling, we would love to help improve their operations. So that looks at improving the capture rate or reducing contamination. We've done this a lot through cart tagging, where we'll do 4 passes on a route by lifting the lids, examining what's inside. If there's contamination, we put a cart tag on the back of that and mark, hey, don't put plastic bags in here, or here's tanglers. And then we'll also send out a couple mailers to inform folks about what belongs in their cart and what doesn't. And something relatively new that we've been exploring is we have a partnership with Prairie Robotics, which is a company that puts cameras on recycling trucks that can use technology, AI, artificial intelligence, to examine what's dumped from a cart. And if it identifies contamination, like the one pictured here with these plastic bags, it will automatically trigger a mailer to go out to that household that's geolocated with the cart. And it'll say, hey, 123 Main Street, we noticed on the 1st of September, you put plastic bags into your recycling cart. By the way, they're not recyclable. Here's the other materials that aren't recyclable. So it's like an automatic oops tag. Instead of doing it inspecting by lifting lids with people, you can do it with camera technology. In East Lansing, we ran this program and we saw a 22.5% reduction in contamination, which is pretty substantial when you think about how much contamination costs communities when they go to a MRF. And then lastly, we have a grant grant program with material recovery facilities. We have a director here named Spence Davenport who knows a lot of the MRFs and is willing to work with them by providing technical assistance and grant funding to improve their operations and improve their capture rate. So we have a couple funding sources like the Polypropylene Recycling Coalition, the PET Recycling Coalition, the UBC grant program for aluminum, Film and Flexibles Recycling Coalition. So these different coalitions are made up of funders that make these materials, and they want to make sure that MRFs, material recovery facilities, can accept them and recycle them at a high rate. So, for instance, the Polypropylene Recycling Coalition put a grant together for the Recycling Works in Elkhart to say, hey, we'll purchase you some equipment to make sure that you can recycle polypropylene bottles that are coming through, polypropylene tubs that are coming through. I believe they're getting a robot to do that. And actually, the Elkhart MRF is getting funding for the PET Coalition and the Film and Flex Coalition as well. So they're kind of spreading the love across all of our MRF granting. But through these grants, the partnership can pay for optical sorters, robots, efficiency improvements, retrofits, new container lines, new sorting screens, basically anything to capture more material you can apply for. And it's very competitive. It's, as you would believe, a lot of folks would like this funding, but this funding is done on a quarterly basis. But on our website, which I'll be sharing here in a second, you'll be able to see all of our granting opportunities from curbside to drop-off, multifamily, and MRFs as well. So lastly, here are two examples that I believe we funded with the RMDB. DAC Richmond is a PET recycler. So DAC makes I believe a lot of carpet with Alpec, but we've helped co-fund with the RMDB to pull out PET residuals on their residual line. So basically making sure that more PET bottles are coming out of what was once going to landfill. And also in Muncie in 2023, we co-funded with the RMDB education only grant. We paid for the education to see, sorry, someone said something. They switched from bags to curbside recycling carts, and we help pay for the education outreach. In terms of future grants, we'd love to do more co-granting with your organization. For instance, Indianapolis, if I believe there's 240 plus households there. That's if every household in Indianapolis were to receive a 96-gallon recycling cart, we think there'd be 40,000 more tons of recycling coming in to the circular economy, just as an example. But happy to discuss multifamily granting, MRF granting, curbside granting, and drop-off granting for more rural areas of the state as well. This is my information. Please feel free to reach out to me directly to talk about any of these grant programs, or if you have a community in mind or a nonprofit in mind that could use our funding. And then lastly, there's our website where you can find our granting opportunities at. I hope I didn't eat up all my 20 minutes and I still have some time for questions if that's the case.
Any questions for Matt? Mr. Gurn?
Matt, I assume the source of your funds for grants come from the corporate partnerships that you have?
Yes. So the packaging companies, like I mentioned, for instance, American Beverage, which is made up of a lot of bottling companies, provides a very large percentage of our grant funding, gives us funding every year to then distribute to communities. I like that a lot. We get funding from corporate entities and then pass it on to communities that need it.
Approximately how much money per year is available?
For community granting in the tens of millions a year. I actually don't know the exact number. That's a great question, but I believe in the, anywhere between 30 to 50 million. And that's spread across the entire country. So from MRF projects to community projects, from Hawaii to Maine and Puerto Rico.
Matt, my name is Debbie Hackman, and I work a lot with small communities. I'm interested in your drop-off programs now. Do you ever fund, equipment rental for these small communities that maybe can't afford to purchase the equipment?
Have not funded rentals yet, mostly doing outright purchases, but would not necessarily be opposed to it. I'll say that when we make grant funding, one of the criterion that we think about is the longevity of the program. And so we want to make sure that this recycling drop-off site can be sustained into the future. And one way to do that is for the community to own them, to own the equipment. If that's not feasible, that's okay. We can still look into it, but usually our drop-off granting can pay for the full cost of a lot of equipment. Like we've done, the upper limit of our drop-off grant program has been, I think we did a $250,000 grant. So that's gonna, that's enough to purchase essentially 5 compactors with the concrete and the electrical and the signage necessary to make those work. Those would be expensive compactors, so maybe even more than that. So doing a lot of outright purchasing on for the community. We don't have a set match for the drop-off grant. So if you have a community in mind that needs roll-off containers or concrete or site development, we can certainly talk about as a priority how they can own that first. And then if that doesn't work, then we could explore a rental.
Thank you.
Sure. Also, that's my specific work stream. Please reach out to me with any list you have of rural communities or counties that need drop-off grant funding. I would love to spend 15 minutes talking about that with you after the call.
Thanks.
Do we ever or have any other questions for Matt from any of the board members? Those that are remote as well? Or anyone in general? Well, Matt, thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation.
Sorry, I know you just said that. I do have one question, and it's something I think I kind of brought up. Do you see any trends in the grants that you've been funding more recently? I know that drop-off recycling's newer, do you see that? Do you see maybe more robots at the MRFs? What kind of
Sure.
trends are you?
Yeah, good question, Deanna. So, yeah, definitely at the MRF, more robots are becoming prevalent, especially as they've kind of worked out the kinks from the first generation that came out, 8 years ago. So that's definitely something we've seen growing. And then with drop off, I would say a growing trend is using consolidation. So basically, however possible to move material in bulk is a growing trend to make sure that when you have to haul drop off containers across county lines to MRFs or in markets, that you're not hauling a lot of air, to make sure that it's as compacted as possible by using compactors or balers, even if it's source separated. And then with cart granting, we're seeing carts get bigger. We're seeing a lot more automated collection. So those programs that are still using open top bins or bags, those are a dying breed, where we're seeing curbside move much more into using carts just because of the efficiency savings of using automated collection and the health benefits of not needing your sanitation workers to lift every container that's put out on the curb. So that's another extra benefit of the carts is the human element of it's safer, it's better on your back if you're not having to throw 500 bags of recycling into the back of a truck every day.
Matt, Terry Guerin. I was in a meeting about 3-4 years ago with you folks, and I think it was still the Indiana Recycling Coalition before it became circular. And in the city of Indianapolis. So are you still involved in some capacity with that group?
Yes.
Are you
Yes. My director, Charlotte Pitt, has very, very interested in Indianapolis. I believe has worked with the Recycling Coalition as well, and has traveled a few times to Indianapolis. we'd love to do some work there. So I would say that Indianapolis is, since I've started, has been one of our biggest targets for a CART grant. Just such a huge opportunity there. I think it's one of the largest cities, if not the largest city in America, that doesn't have universal card access.
Yeah, we've heard a few times.
Okay, sorry. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but yeah.
Hope soon. We hope to see movement soon. And Recycling Partnership has been pretty good with looping item into meetings where we could, possibly join collaborative any efforts on that as well. So
For sure.
Appreciate
Well,
I
I
was
really
gonna-
appreciate the time today. Deanna, thank you again for the invitation. Please reach out with co-granting opportunities. It's my final thought.
thank you. I guess my final thought is I think like Muncie was a great example of a collaborative that really made a difference. The board did have Jason Donati come and present on their results, initial results, and Tom and I visited, and just having the mailers and the additional component of the education on top of it. I mean, Jason was telling us those results were way above and beyond subscription services that they expected to receive, and they're able to actually contribute more money and more trucks and expand services way more than they thought. So I think that's just a real shining star example of collaboration and how it can really show big results and be effective. So thanks again for the Recycling Partnership's work and talking to us today. So,
All right, thank you, Matt. I believe next we have, can you help me with the name?
sure,
Anna?
I can go ahead and
All right.
introduce, so for our next discussion, Kelvin, Okamoto, right? Or close to it, he can correct me. I've met Kelvin actually through, the IRC, now Circular Indiana, a couple times, and came across his name again when I was looking at some information on PFAS and compost on the U.S. Composting Council. So he's got a nice resume of information that I'm sure he can kind of introduce himself and share better than I can. But since the board had asked for information on emerging trends with PFAS, and I wanted to make it relevant to some of the things that we're seeing, I asked him to come on and talk about PFAS and products and packaging and how those might affect our compost sites and other operations as well. So go ahead, Kelvin. I think you're on. Yeah, there you go. So I see that you're talking, but we don't have any sound.
Yeah. Kelvin, if you go to the top right, where the mic is, if you click the down arrow, there should be an option, says microphone, and if you have another option, you might wanna try switching to that.
Oh, heard something very quiet.
Very quiet.
There we go. Try talk again.
Can you hear me?
What's so quiet?
Very faint.
It's like this, I think the Microsoft is like the microphone is not capturing your voice, Calvin.
Yeah.
Almost like it's muffled.
If you get close to your computer, get real close to your computer and speak.
Here it is. Hand on the mic.
It's fighting the international shoulder.
Are you able to join in the call with your phone? Because you can use your phone as the microphone.
No,
Still can't hear.
technology is great when it works.
So do you want to go to the next one?
Well, unfortunately, our next presenter is not going to be able to log in until 10:45 because they're in California. That's 7:45.
We have a few minutes, we can wait on Calvin
Yeah.
if he wants to continue to work at it.
Do we want to skip down to 6 and then back up?
We can, that's
Is that?
gonna take
Is that gonna take a long
a
time?
minute. There's more donuts in the back of the room and juice. If anybody wants to go
If
get a
everyone
donut or
needs
juice.
a break while we're working on this, we can take a break.
I'm sorry, Hansel.
Oh, you want some leave?
Representative Arrington.
It's got a chocolate syrup.
Yeah. Are you gonna eat that?
I was just wondering, he has it, it's the dial-in by phone, right?
Yeah.
This is his calendar permit, so. I-
I still can't hear you, Calvin. If you have a pair of headphones, that might work. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we can.
All right, Kelvin, I think we can hear you now, so if you want to go ahead and get started,
Yeah, interesting.
and share your screen.
Cause I thought they were good. Can you hear us, Calvin?
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound.
Right.
I'm giving the phone number again to call. I think he's trying to call in now.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear
Yeah.
Okay. Let me mute my mute. Okay, that's really better. I muted the computer. Can you hear me now?
you. Yes, we
Yes,
can.
sir.
Okay. Sorry about this. Microsoft Teams wouldn't let me call in from the phone initially. Let me put up my presentation. And just wanted to comment about previous comments about the recycling partnership and Circular Indiana. I'm on the board of Circular Indiana also. And there's definitely some efforts to move forward with working to get Indianapolis on recycling programs. And in fact, the Indianapolis Circular Economy initiative is actually being restarted to get everybody back going again. So can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Deanna, for inviting me to talk. I know as a backup, and hopefully I cover what you're interested in. This is a pretty broad area to discuss, so it'll be pretty fast, but then in the question and answer period, hopefully you can, ask your specific questions. I head up the ASTM subcommittee that actually sets the standards for biodegradability and bio-based testing and specifications. And I also am the technical advisor of the Compost Manufacturing Alliance, as well as various other things. So anyway, that's why Deanna reached out to me, and we'll just get going. So the overview, just really quickly, PFAS definition, commercial uses, presence in the environment, and testing for PFAS. So the definition for PFAS is per a polyfluoroalkyl substance. It's the latest term. It's a class of chemicals, and the federal government even has several different definitions for what is included as PFAS. I think the last time we looked, there were 9 different definitions depending on the agency and so on. It was initially thought to cover only the fluorinated organic acid and derivatives, mostly perfluorooctanoic acid and perfluorooctane sulfonate, PFOA and PFOS, which are your chemicals for making Scotchgard, Scotch Band, Teflon, and so on. Now, it symbolizes for any chemical with more than one fluorine on an alkyl, non-aromatic carbon chain or ring. So it includes a very large number of chemicals now, thousands of chemicals from 2-carbon chemicals to polymers and lots of different uses. Many have been proven to have acute and or chronic toxicity, but not all. When you're covering a large class like this under one definition, it is, of course, you're going to have differing effects on the body and so on. Just as an example, persistence in the human body varies. The 8-carbon PFOA has a half-life in humans of approximately 70 days, whereas the 4-carbon PFBA has a half-life in humans of 36 hours. They are nicknamed forever chemicals because many do not break down in the environment, but that's not been proven for all. Now fall into the definition of PFAS because it's such a large group of chemicals. What are the useful properties? Largely water and grease resistance, fire retardancy, and non-stick. So your most well-known brands of Teflon, Scotchgard, and Scotch Band, 3M is stopped producing Scotch Garden Scotch Band now, and DuPont, or now Chemours, Teflon is now used in limited applications. It's not used as widely anymore, but it still has a lot of industrial use where there is no alternative. The other uses are firefighting foam. It's one of the biggest issues because that is in the environment. Microwave popcorn bag coatings, oil and grease resistance for paper and pulp molded products, slip agent for traditional plastics, and non-stick coatings. So what is the presence of PFAS in the environment? And you got to look at soil, water, compost, solid waste from wastewater treatment, various other things. They all have, and pretty much every place you look has PFAS. It's been around for so long, and because many of the ones like PFOA and PFOS do not break down in the environment, they just build up over time. The EPA and US Geological Survey have been studying this for 15 to 20 years. The most complete studies are in water. When they went back and evaluated various places around the country, these are where they found PFAS. It's wherever you see a darkened circle. The open circles, PFAS was not identified in tap water. All the others, and you'll notice Indiana has a couple that looks like one in Indianapolis and one in Lafayette. And the number of PFAS detection is, by the size of the circle. Should be noted that, out of the thousands of chemicals, there's only about 100 that actually can be identified from water, because those are the only ones that actually have controls for actually testing against and for detection testing. The prevalence in soil is being tested at this moment. There is not really a EPA-approved method for testing from soil, and also the controls for a lot of the chemicals, PFAS chemicals that might be in soil, do not have actual analytical controls or samples. Professor Linda Lee at Purdue actually has EPA grants to study and develop the tests and controls for the soil. I think she has another 1 to 2 years on that grant to complete the work. But even after that, it will have to go out to the public for evaluation, or other labs to do, German tests and so on. But EPA has, and other places have studied what they can find as PFAS in the soil, and it has been found in a lot of soils, especially where wastewater solid waste has been applied. That's been a big problem up in Milwaukee. Municipal Solid Waste District actually has been doing solid waste drying for a long time and having them applied on farm fields. Well, a lot of the farm fields now have enough PFAS in them that they can no longer legally grow human crops. And that's now becoming a problem. Who knows where else this issue may exist. The EPA has also published several studies on PFAS uptake by plants from soil. And yes, the plants do take PFAS from the soil, and it can be in the fruit, the leaves, the stems, wherever else. It all depends on the type of plant as to exactly how much goes to each part of the plant. This is a study from Professor Linda Lee, which was published a few years ago on PFAS in compost, industrial composting. You'll notice that the leaves in the backyard compost had very low levels of PFAS, but there was still some PFAS present. When you go back and to residential commercial food waste and composting, you do have higher levels of PFAS. Where the PFAS comes from is a question, because industrially compostable packaging is actually, I'll go into that in a few seconds, but in essence, there's 100 parts per million maximum fluorine content allowed in San Francisco, Europe, and other locations. This is fluorine, not PFAS. And I'll go later on in the testing part, I'll explain why it's done this way rather than by PFAS content. Biodegradable Products Institute and the Compost Manufacturing Lines, as of January 1, 2020, will not certify products with materials greater than 100 parts per million fluorine or intentionally added fluorinated chemicals. And in fact, this affected mostly paper and pulp molded products. In fact, almost all paper and pulp molded products lost their certifications at the time. Nowadays, you will see a number of products available online that say they are compostable, but they do not have certifications. Most likely, and in many cases have already been tested, that they do still contain PFAS. So when you're looking at things for compostability or home compostability, you want to make sure that you get a certified product so that you get something that does not contain PFAS. The PFAS in compost is from the environment and food, most likely, because it is not, if you're doing certified materials, not coming in with the packaging itself. And the packaging is only a small minor component of compost piles. So one thing you see in compostable packaging, if you're going to have them, would be a C6 or a C4, which may be on a large polymer backbone. They're the typical grease and oil resistance and fiber-based food packaging. They're in there to keep the oil and water from running through packaging. The health effects are being studied. C4 has limited effects by studies so far. And the C4, as you have gone, 50% is passed out of the body in 36 hours. There's also not known the environmental persistence of C4 and C6 specifically. But, you know, we still have to treat it like we don't want them. Testing for PFAS, there are several ways to test, and the first way is to do a specific chemical identification. This is typically done by gas chromatography, mass spectroscopy, or liquid chromatography, mass spectroscopy, GCMS or LCMS. This is expensive. The standards are not available for all PFAS, and it is not presently accurate for fiber-based materials. And I'll go into the reason in a second. The other way is to do extraction or migration testing. As stated, standard methods for a specific identification of PFAS does not work for paper or fiber-based products because the PFAS binds to the fibers and is not released through an extraction or migration testing, which is what you have to do for your GCMS or LCMS studies. The methods must be developed that degrade fibers to release the PFAS, but the method can also not destroy the PFAS. And actually, there's one paper company that thinks they have developed the method, but they need some additional work and have actually talked to Professor Linda Lee to help them do the final part of that development. But it could still take several years to complete and to confirm that it actually works. So the other way to test for PFAS is to do what is called total fluorine analysis. And in essence, what you're doing is you're testing for all fluorine is present in a product. There are different ways to do this. There's particle-induced gamma emission. This is the way that is this is done at University of Notre Dame. The issue, and this is the cheapest and fastest way to do it. However, this is a surface analysis only. And there are a lot of products that are produced using silicon fluoride or other things to release the product from molds, from paper rolls, from other things like that. And therefore, you can either get a higher content than you should for fluorine, or a lower content for fluorine because you're not picking up the fluorine content in the body of the product. You can do combustion ion chromatography, and one that's becoming more popular, digestion, and then followed by ion-specific electrode fluoride ion analysis. The issue with total fluorine testing is that all fluorine content, no matter the source, determines the total fluorine. So minerals can have a lot of fluorine content. Talc can have a high content of fluoride, up to 30-some%. Old release agents like silicon fluoride, which can be used to help make paper, to make plastic products, and so on, as well as processing aids. And a lot of pharmaceuticals actually have fluorine too, but hopefully they're not in any in the compost. To determine PFAS content, you need to analyze for the other fluoride sources, including minerals, mold and release agents, and other organics, so that you subtract their fluorine content from whatever fluorine content you get for the total product. So you do digestion followed by typical fluoride analysis. Once again, as said, the PFAS binds to fiber-based samples. And what was found is that with the methods that labs were using, doing digestion followed by typical fluoride analysis, the same product, they were getting any results from 37 to 1,300 parts per million fluorine. And the product that was going in actually did have 1,300 parts per million fluorine. So there was obviously an issue with some of the lab testing. What was found is that to get a consistent total fluoride results, you must do full product specimen ground and sampled, adjust the sample size to at least 1.0 grams, and run the test in duplicate. And if the two results do not match, run it a third time. And more importantly, the digestion must be performed in a closed environment. It is suggested it's an oxygen bomb or a PAR bomb. And the digestion, because the digestion in atmosphere releases volatile fluoride contents. And it was found that the labs that were coming up with a low fluoride ion content after digestion were using open crucibles. Thus, the fluoride components were all volatilizing. And there's my information. Hopefully there's plenty of time for you to ask questions that may be more relevant to what you're seeking. But thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Okamoto. Questions from any board members? Mr. Guerin?
Yes, Terry Guerin. What's being done to, I guess, enhance the elimination of these chemicals in packaging? And I'm thinking packaging like the popcorn, microwavable popcorn packaging that you mentioned. What's being done to speed up the elimination of these chemicals in packaging in general?
There are a number of solutions depending on the type of product. For like fiber-based products and so on, what has happened is that many of them just taken the PFAS out, but now your oil and grease resistance is pretty poor. To offset that, some do a coating. For industrial compostability, they put on a industrially compostable plastic coating. Does add a lot of cost to do that. The other thing they can do is go back to using what was used before, which is a compostable wax. Yes, synthetic paraffin waxes that are compostable that used to be used. You do need a high content, much higher content of that than PFAS. Once again, cost becomes an issue. There are some other companies coming up with other chemicals you can possibly replace the PFAS with. They don't all work terribly well. So there's more work being done. But in essence, right now, for industrial compostable packaging, either they coat or they just take it out. In pulp molded products, there is another process that has been developed that also may work, where you pretty much sear the surface of the pulp molded product by pressing it under high heat, which really combines all the fibers together without chemicals. Expensive process. I know of only one company that does that in China. None of the companies here in the US do it. So that's one way. In the case of the popcorn bags, someone is working on a coating, a different coating for the inside of those bags, or possibly even a high temperature polymer coating for doing that. of course, the minute you go to a high temperature polymer coating, the question you get into is that recyclable? Right now, you don't really recycle it anyway because you don't really want paper with a lot of food contamination because of the process. It should be noted, and to go with your question, is that if PFAS is in products that are being recycled for paper because of the process in water, that PFAS is going out with the water. So there's also an issue for recycling when you have PFAS in paper products. And it should be noted that is also the same thing associated with any paper with coatings or with or the adhesives, because those are also plastics, though most people don't think of them as plastics, and they do not dissolve or biodegrade in water. So that's another issue that we haven't really done.
Thank you.
I like the train.
So I was thinking about, I recently sat on a call about some of those topics. Are you familiar with the study in Florida? I think it's Florida State University, maybe, where they started, I don't know what method it was, but they were testing for PFAS at compost operations. And there was detecting it. So is that just leachate from the packaging originally going into the food, and then into the compost, would you say, or are you, I mean, I don't know if you know.
I don't know that study, but it's probably sounds similar to the one that Professor Lee did. Considering compost packaging is not supposed to have any PFAS in it at this time, because you do have PFAS in the open environment, in soils, in plants, and in food, it is most likely coming from those sources. Packaging is only going into compost piles to bring food along, because food is energy for the compost system. It speeds it up. It adds, it's the energy source, an additional energy source for industrial composting. So it speeds the process up. Packaging is typically no more than 1% of the total going into industrial compost piles, if they most do not. And therefore, in most cases, it's coming in with the food or the organic waste that is going into compost piles.
Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead, Terry.
Terry Garrett, one final question, and just maybe kind of silly. But I know landfills in Michigan, they were looking at PFAS in landfills. And one of the problems was not only the cost of testing, but also the limitations of the technology that was available at that time. Has that changed any?
No, it really hasn't changed. It is expensive. It's the GCMS, LCMS methods, because generally you're testing for water or for the oil, ground, whatever testing. And you're right, it is limited because there are thousands of PFAS by categories, by class, and there's only 100 or so that actually there are standards for. So yes, it's very expensive. It takes time. I don't know whether it's really going to tell you everything you need or want to know. With modern landfills, one would hope that when you have lined the bottom of the landfill, and then also when you close it, you line the top, So hopefully anything that's in the landfill, including PFAS, does not escape. And I don't know, in my opinion, if that's true for a landfill, then you don't really need to bother testing because it's not going to affect the environment. Now, if it's a landfill like East Fishkill, New York, where you got a stream running through the bottom of it, or things like that, yeah, you want to test. Your older landfills may be like that, but your newer landfills should all be fully encapsulated when they're closed.
Thank you.
But doesn't the PFAS escape through leachate?
Yes, it escapes through leachate, but if you have a fully lined landfill, then you won't have a leachate. If you have an old landfill that is not lined on the bottom, yes, that is a problem. And EPA has, a accepted method for testing for PFAS in water. And in fact, most of the wastewater treatment facilities, I think, now have to test, and water treatment facilities have to test for PFAS in the next year or two. But like I said, you don't have controls for analytical analysis for most of the PFAS that exist.
Any other questions? This is just bringing up a lot of very deep questions in my own mind. Being an old landfill guy, I know degradation of waste is going to create liquids and throughout the life of the decomposition. And it has to go somewhere. There has to be a treatment method available at the water source, the water treatment plants to eliminate these.
And actually, what they're finding is most wastewater treatment facilities, if they have really good filters and other means or biological remediation down at the end, the water going out of those and out of wastewater treatment facilities tends to be very low in PFAS. The problem is that now that it's in the solid waste from the wastewater treatment facility, or it's in the the filters and so on, what do you do with those? Because now the PFAS is in those items. And for landfills.
Well, thank you very much for a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. We're obviously trying to do better. Sometimes we're impacting the environment by doing better. And we have to look at the balance and the, I guess the net result. But very interesting. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And sorry about the problems with.
No problem at all. Thanks for joining us today, Kelvin. In order to keep this moving, we have our next speakers ready to online to present. So our last presentation today is on solar panel recycling. I invited Nick Kane and Jesse Simons from Solar Cycle to present to us. You guys can go ahead, feel free to introduce yourselves. You should be able to share, if you have any presentation or anything else.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. I'm sharing it right now. Hopefully you can see that. And yeah, thank you, Kelvin, for that presentation. Learned a little bit about a topic that I know we're all concerned about. I'm going to give some quick introductions and then turn it over to Jesse. So my name's Nick Kane. I'm Director of Government Relations at Solar Cycle, and I've been in the environmental industry about 25 years. Before joining Solar Cycle a few years ago, I was working as a program evaluator for state agencies and investor-owned utilities looking at energy and environmental programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Jesse now.
Thanks, Nick. it's great to be here. Good morning. I am Jesse Simons. I'm a co-founder and Chief Commercial Officer here at Solar Cycle, where we are building the most advanced solar panel recycling
Jesse.
technology platform. Yep. Hello? What's that?
Hear us?
I can hear you. Yep.
Just had a little hiccup with the network. If you could repeat like the last 20 seconds.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. So, co-founder, chief commercial officer, and here at Solar Cycle, we are basically building out the most advanced solar panel recycling technology platform on the planet. Prior to starting Solar Cycle, I spent 20 years working at the Sierra Club, where my focus was on climate, clean energy, and helping move America towards a clean energy future. And what became clear to me was that there was a huge opportunity to make clean energy technologies more sustainable by closing the loop and basically making those technologies themselves renewable. And so I joined forces with a veteran in the solar industry and a veteran in solar panel recycling. And actually, can you go back up, Nick? And we founded Solar Cycle with the mission to basically mine and refine old solar panels wherever in the world they were made in the first place into new solar panels made here in America with recycled content. And our current technology platform gets 95% of the value out of a panel. We'll walk through that later and I'll show you how we do it. Currently, we're working with panel makers, we're working with the big asset owners who are installing solar, and then we're working down there at extracting the materials out of the panels. And currently we are selling them out into the domestic supply chain to be turned into other products. But where we're heading next to truly close the loop on the solar circular economy is to start making value-added products out of those materials so that we can sell them back to the panel makers who are then designing those panels to be more easily recycled and making those panels with recycled materials. That's the vision that we have, and that's what we're heading towards. If you go to the next slide, Nick. This is just a quick overview of the team we've assembled to do this. Nick, can you go to the next slide? Yep. Suvi Sharma is our, nope. Sorry, go back one, Nick, to the team.
Sorry, I think there's a little lag there. Is everyone seeing this slide with the bios and faces and everything? Okay, great. Sorry, Jesse.
And you all can still hear me? All's good on the network side? Okay, great. So Suvi Sharma is our CEO. He's a founder of two publicly traded solar companies, Nextracker and Solaria, a big solar panel maker. Pablo Diaz is our chief technology officer, and he is the one who has 2 PhDs, one in e-waste recycling, another specifically in photovoltaics recycling. I won't go through everybody here, but you can see we've got a nice mix of climate tech investors and people in the environmental space, including Michael Brune, the former executive director of the Sierra Club. So we're really committed to making solar even more sustainable by closing the loop on the solar economy. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we've drawn in some of the biggest solar companies on the planet. There's about 120 solar companies that control over 80% of all solar panels in the country. And we've got long-term agreements with over 70 of them, including the largest asset owners, the largest engineering, procurement, construction firms, and operations and management firms, the big manufacturers, and the big residential and commercial industrial players. And what we're finding is that there's real stakeholder interest from within these companies to recycle rather than landfill. So even without regulation, we are signing up these customers. They're doing it voluntarily. The premium does exist, but it's actually not that significant compared to landfilling. There's a lot of false information out there about landfilling. You can do it for like $1 a panel and recycling's $30 a panel. The premium ends up not being actually that significant, and it's a rounding error in the economics of these very large projects. And they recognize that in order to maintain their social license to operate, they have to sign up for these agreements to recycle their panels, and they're doing so. If we go to the next slide, Nick, the way it works with our customers is they sign what we call an RSA, which is a recycling services agreement. It's a long-term agreement where we set up terms and conditions to recycle all of their panels on their projects. It sets all the terms and conditions. And then once they have an issue, whether it's breakage during construction or ongoing operations and maintenance issues or a big hailstorm or hurricane, whatever it is, they log into our portal, they create a work order, they tell us when they want it to get picked up. We issue a service order, set up the pickup time, finalize all the details. Then we send our trucks out, pick up the panels, bring it to our location, do the recycling, and then issue certificates of destruction and recycling, and ultimately environmental impact information that they can put into their environmental, social, and governance reports. Go next slide, Nick. So, okay, how do we do it? What's our process? What makes us unique? Why are all these huge customers going with us? It's because we've invested a huge amount of effort and resources into innovation, research, and development. We've raised over $45 million in venture funding to basically take this whole industry to the next level. We have a largely automated process where once the panels arrive on our site, they go onto a conveyor belt. There are machines that pop the frame off, the aluminum frame comes off. There are machines that remove the junction box, which is full of copper and other kinds of wiring, and those get set aside and sold off into the supply chain. We then have a few different tools that we're working on that separate the glass cleanly from the rest of the laminate, and that allows us to sell the pure glass off and get the laminate, which we then put into a conveyor belt that goes into a crusher and a grinder and a shredder, and ultimately goes through our patented electrostatic process machine that separates the metals, the valuable metals that are still in there, the silver, the silicon, the copper that were in the laminate, from the remaining polymers and trace amounts of glass and dust. And if you have the next slide, Nick, that basically allows us, if you look off to the right, to sell aluminum frames, the solar metals, and the glass. This is just to give you a sense of where we're at this year. We've sold 400,000 pounds of aluminum, over 100,000 pounds of those solar metals, and 800,000 pounds of solar glass. And we truly are just at the beginning of the up and to the right curve of what this recycling world is going to look like. I won't go through the entire chart on the left, but people ask, well, when you say you recover, over 95% of the value, how do you calculate this? You can see that here on the left. We look at what is the value of each of these materials, then what is our recovery rate, and then your value recovery. And what you can really see is we are recovering 99% of the glass, 95% of the silver. Silicon, we're only recovering 80%, but still a fair amount. And it's also not, the most valuable thing we have here. And then copper is very high. Aluminum's 100%. Aluminum's like the most recyclable thing on the planet. And unfortunately, right now, we're not recovering the polymers, but you can also see there's no value in those polymers. And luckily, the weight of the polymers is less than 5% of the weight of a panel. And so currently, we are landfilling those in non-hazardous sites because it's non-hazardous. But for the most part, we're extracting the valuable materials and selling them back in to the supply chain. Good. Next slide. Even though we're still at a very small scale, operating out of one facility, we've already recycled this year the equivalent of 80 Statues of Liberty. So that starts giving you the perspective of how big this is, right? Because each of these panels is 50 to 60 pounds, and we're taking in hundreds of thousands of them, and eventually we're going to be taking in tens of millions. It's a ways out, right? So I wouldn't immediately start freaking out as regulators, like, we got to figure this out immediately. It's still pretty small, but it is growing, and eventually it's going to be massive. Go to the next slide. To give you a sense of how we're going to scale up to meet this massive challenge, our goal is that by the end of next year, we should be able to process anywhere between 2 and 4 million panels a year. That's probably more than all the panels that are going to reach end of life this year, but we see things increasing over time. And because we're the market leader, we want to make sure we have the capacity to do it right. Our workhorse is in Odessa, Texas. You can see that on the left. We have 4 lines there with a nameplate capacity of 1 million panels a year. Each one does 250,000 panels a year for working 2 shifts. They're not fully at scale yet, so we're currently doing 200,000 panels a year, and we're investing a lot in research and development to be able to scale that up. We have a world headquarters in Mesa, Arizona, where we have our lab. We're doing a lot of the innovation and getting DOE grants to get better and better at refining the metals in this and make glass. And we're also getting cadmium telluride line up and running. Everything I've been talking to you about so far is about crystalline silicon panels, which is like 90% of all panels out there in the US. But there are First Solar panels that are made with a different technology. They're harder to recycle. And so we currently have a mechanical process to start taking them apart. And we are designing a pilot line that will launch in early 2025 that is small, capable of doing about 50,000 panels a year, but we can expand it incrementally by 50,000 as much as demand requires. And we have just locked down a new facility in Cedartown, Georgia, which is about 70 miles northwest of Atlanta. You can see a picture of it there. It's 250,000 square feet. It's capable of having 10 recycling lines. And we see this one as being our true, mega factory, super center. And it's going to be right next door to the next phase of Solar Cycle, which is a glass factory that will be making new solar glass sheets out of recycled content. Nick, if you go to the next slide, and I think this is my last slide, phase 1 is basically getting really good at extracting the maximum value of the materials in the panel. Phase 2 is actually making value-added products out of those recycled materials that we can then sell to manufacturers who are making new panels out of our products. The first big move on that front is what we're calling solar glass. We have announced a 5 gigawatt factory, which is basically, call it 3 million sheets of glass a year. We've announced that factory to go in place next to that recycling factory I showed you a second ago in Cedartown. It's breaking ground later this year. It is a massive facility, 1.5 million square feet, and it's within 500 miles of over 15 gigawatts of new domestic manufacturing. All the manufacturing is starting to move onshore. But right now, a lot of it is just assembling panels, right? There's a few leaders like Qcells who are starting to not only assemble panels made with things made overseas, but they're making the cells here. They're making other parts of the panel here. They're going to be making and using glass from here, as well as some of the other major companies we have agreements with. And next up, our plan is to take the recycled aluminum and make new aluminum frames that we can sell to those same manufacturers. We have options for taking the silicon that comes out of a panel and turning that into anodes that can replace graphite, which is one of the biggest drivers of climate change from the transition to a clean energy economy. We can basically use recycled silicon to replace graphite and make new batteries. And then we also have a lot of R&D going, because I mentioned earlier the plastics we have to landfill. We obviously want to get to zero waste. We don't want to landfill those plastics. So we're looking at ways where we can recycle those that plastic into essentially new pallets that we can use for our recycling process so that we make it completely circular. So that is who Solar Cycle is and what we're doing. I'll hand it over to Nick to give you a bit more context on the overall landscape of recycling, and then happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. So I just want to check with our hosts to make sure we're okay on time for a few more slides, or would you rather go to questions? It's really up to you.
I think we're fine on time to go ahead and do a few more slides.
Okay,
No
great.
problem.
Okay, super. So I'll just share a couple things from our research. So this is from the IEA's end of life management report. And one question we get a lot from regulators, that is, of course, a critical question, is how much volume do we expect and what's the growth rate? And this chart shows you that by 2050, we certainly expect the mass of end-of-life solar to be a substantial driver of municipal solid waste. But right now, we're over here. It's pretty small. And by 2030, we expect about 1 million metric tons across the entire United States. So that's about 0.25% of the expected municipal solid waste stream in 2030. So still a small component for most locations. Oops, sorry. And then I lost control of my deck here. I don't know what's happening. Let me just see if I can go to the next slide. Give me 1 sec. Pardon me. Let's see. There we go. And, one thing we do want to stress is that panels are designed for safety. They pose little risk to human health or the environment in almost any operating condition, and even when they're landfilled. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Is there a question? Oh, okay. We are concerned, however, with, what we call shred and bed recyclers. We don't want to see modules shredded by kind of typical e-waste processors and then have the aggregates sold off for things like roadbed or bee blasting without the output quality of the materials being checked to make sure there's no residual lead, or in the case of thin film panels, cadmium. And we are working toward, we are ISO 14001 certified at our Texas facility, and we're working toward, oh, I'm sorry. Is it just background or is there a question?
I think you're just getting an echo, Nick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to lower my voice a little bit. And we are working toward an R2 certification to ensure that the quality of the materials we're selling is that they're clean, they're safe, and that off-takers know what they're getting. Okay, so I'll just close. This is my last slide. One thing that is an amazing opportunity and privilege in this job is getting to work with Jesse and with the great team here and with regulators around the country, learning about what's going on at the state level. And this map is from a recent EPRI report, and it actually just shows which states have decommissioning requirements for solar, and Indiana is included. But most of these decommissioning requirements don't yet require recycling. Some do. So one thing that we think is a kind of low-hanging fruit at the state level in terms of improving the regulations and keeping modules out of the waste stream so they can be recovered, mined, recycled, is to ensure that if your state does have decommissioning requirements for large solar projects, that you add in a recycling requirement. We also have found, by working with a lot of different states that are trying to build systems like Washington and California and Minnesota, that we need to have different types of solutions for different sectors. So the residential market is going to be different than the, commercial market, which often has large behind the meter projects. You can imagine a Walmart or other big box store, right, could have hundreds of kilowatts of solar on the roof. This can be very different than, a mom and pop installer putting a 10 kW system on your roof. And then of course, utility scale is its own world. That's our specialty. And we think that, state regulators should treat those systems a little bit differently. And then the last 2 points is just, we think that if states do embark on building programs, they should build in flexibility. We're seeing Washington State kind of really struggling right now because the program they designed is not really fit with the way the market is working, the recycling market is working. And so if there had been a few changes to the bill that was passed in 2015, they still haven't kind of stood up their system, it would make things a lot easier for recyclers like us who want to work with large asset owners. And the last point is that we are working to innovate in this space, and Jesse is taking the lead in this, can answer questions. We're working with large asset owners to set up escrow accounts and use other financial assurance tools, because the one thing we don't want is we don't want local communities to be stuck with the burden. And we know with the asset owners we work with that they want to be responsible and ensure modules are recycled. So thanks again to Deanna for inviting us and to the board for listening to our presentation. And we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, do we have any questions from board members?
Bruce.
Mr. Guerin?
Yeah, Terry Guerin. I don't know what the composition of windmill blades are, but how big a leap would it be for you to also consider trying to recycle those?
Yeah, great question, Terry. We did look at it, and what we decided was we wanted to go narrow and very deep on solar. And so that's why we're not just focusing on recycling solar panels, but then figuring out how do you take the materials unique to solar and turn them into new value-added products so we can, as I said earlier, close the loop. We looked at windmill blades. It is a totally different composition. And the reality is that you would need, a completely different business and technology and different kind of PhDs and different kinds of chemists. So it's not part of our business. I am aware of other companies that are looking at it. And I'll say that my sense is most wind blades today are being made and designed for easier recyclability. The challenge is that a lot of the early blades that went out there just really weren't. And I think that is created. In fact, it was one of the things that sparked us to start this company was watching what was happening with wind blades reaching end of life a lot sooner than people thought, and people not having a good answer for what to do with them. We wanted to make sure that didn't happen for solar, particularly because solar is about to be the big clean energy workhorse. Wind, I think, is going to stay there, but solar is going to really take over the majority of clean energy in the future.
I will just jump in to say that I think there is some good news on the horizon. I know that the National Renewable Energy Lab is funding some research in this. And I know that one of the junior people who's worked at Solar Cycle has kind of left to start their own company, and their focus is going to be recycling wind blades. So I think because there's so much wind out there, especially in the Midwest and in California and the West Coast as well, I think you're going to see solutions pop up.
Agreed.
A solar panel, like the first year or initial year of the solar, the life expectancy of a solar panel, did you say that?
I didn't, and it's an interesting question, because the solar panel in theory can last, there are ones that go up in space where there's no atmosphere. They'll produce energy for like ever. The typical warranty is for 20 to 25 years. And in theory, they can last 20 to 25 years. In reality, what we're seeing in the field is, first of all, you have these things are basically glass, right? So they're tempered glass in a lot of cases, but they're glass. So during shipping to the US, there's breakage. During manufacturing here in the US, there's breakage. During shipping, there's breakage. During installation, there's breakage. And so you have an early loss right during the construction. And that's a big part of our current business. Then, during standard operations and maintenance over, 20 years, you lose less than 0.5% a year to normal standard things, like somebody backs a truck up into it or, whatever happens. But we are seeing some significant loss through extreme weather events. Hail is a big one, tornadoes, hurricanes, heavy wind. And so that's actually a decent, that ends up reducing the overall average life, right? And then the big one, and this is what makes it really challenging to say what the average lifespan is, because there's like technical end of life when the panel is no longer producing energy. That could be 25 years, 30 years, 50 years. They're really impressive devices. But the big asset owners, that's not what they care about. What they care about is, how do I make the most money producing clean energy for a given amount of land? And what ends up happening is, because solar panels are getting significantly more efficient and cheaper each year, you don't keep your phone for 25 years. You don't keep your laptop for 25 years. You don't keep your car for 25 years. The reality is that these solar panels, the new ones today, are probably 200% more efficient than ones 12 years ago. And that's probably going to be true 12 years from now. So nobody has an exact number on this, but we expect that the average life of a solar panel, once you start taking into account the breakage, the storms, plus this economic end of life question, is probably going to be closer to 12 to 15 years. And so that's why we think it's so important to figure out a way to essentially turn one old solar panel into one new solar panel with the materials that are inside. Because that way, even if they do retire at 15 years, you don't have to go out and mine, a whole new set of silicon, silver, copper, et cetera. You're just able to very efficiently capture the materials from an old one to make a new one. That's our vision.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I may be a bit naive, but I have to ask, are the solar metals valuable enough to where you recycle these at no charge to the supplier, or is there a charge when they drop off panels to be recycled?
There is a charge, and currently it's a premium over what you would pay to drop them off at a landfill. But we do have pretty aggressive cost reduction roadmaps. And we believe, one of our goals is to get to a place before 2030, before we get to 1 million metric tons of waste in this country from solar. We want to get to a place where there's essentially parity between what an end user would pay to landfill it to what they would pay to us to recycle it. So it becomes a no-brainer. Is there a world where eventually we're paying them for solar panels? Yeah, maybe. I mean, technically, within the solar panel, there's over, I want to say $65 worth of materials that if you could capture all of it and seamlessly and frictionlessly put it back in the supply chain, we could be paying people $20 a panel. And that is, in fact, what we're seeing with some of the larger car battery recycling companies, is they're paying to pick it up. But with solar panels, we're not quite there yet because the materials aren't as valuable as what's in a battery, and it's harder to take them apart. So for the time being, our customers do pay us a take-back fee, and willing to do so because they recognize the importance of recycling rather than putting them in a local landfill and losing the support of the community.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, you mentioned like some of the asset owners may do escrow account for decommissioning of solar farms. Is that what I heard, or how is that being implemented?
Can somebody repeat the question? It was hard to hear that. Somebody maybe closer to the microphone.
Yeah, the asset owners escrow accounts.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. So we are trying to create a financial mechanism similar to, I don't know if you all are familiar with the power purchase agreement, but that basically transformed the solar industry about 10 years ago. And it allows a company like Microsoft or Amazon or a big utility to have solar installed quite distant from where the solar is actually being used. And, you're able to have basically a contract that allows you to offset your energy use because you're building solar somewhere. And so what we're working on is an add-on to that where our customers can essentially pre-fund their recycling into their power purchase agreement cost. And so we are able to give them a much lower price for their long-term recycling, because we're able to basically say, look, we know you do some actuarial work and you think, okay, well, currently our price is X, but with cost reduction roadmaps and everything else, it'll be lower. So we're able to go in and offer them a set price today, whether the panel breaks on day 1 or day 10,001, and then they can wrap that, similar to like a warranty on a panel, they can wrap that into the price of what they're selling to their customers. And that way it's taken care of on the front end. And so we are working with a number of the largest asset owners right now in partnership with some of the biggest solar energy buyers, some of the big data center companies that are committed to circularity. And we're working on figuring out basically what is the exact right mechanism for an escrow account versus a letter of credit that backs it. You know, there's also ways you need to layer in bonding and make sure that the insurance these companies are carrying covers recycling, not just landfilling. And so while we don't have a final version of that yet, I think that the marketplace is going to figure that out in the next 3 to 6 months. And then in the same way, power purchase agreements didn't exist, 10 years ago, but now it's the dominant form. We believe that relatively soon, that's how recycling solar panels is going to be financed.
So kind of as a follow-up to that, are you seeing state policies around this requirement? I think this is kind of one reason Tom was asking this. Is there any looking at, what kind of policies we want to look future and end of life, and having like post-closure care costs? So are you seeing that? Yeah.
It's a great question. I'm going to let Nick answer this. I realized I had this on my calendar from 7:45 to 8:30, so I have to jump. It was really a pleasure to meet you all. Nick knows all the answers on the policy side. And if you'd like us to come back or bring any of our technology people to go deeper, happy to do it, and just appreciate all your work. I know how important it is. And thank you very much. I'll let Nick take it from here.
Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Thanks.
Yeah, Deanna, thanks for the question. So, I think that what we're seeing is that there's often in state code already an understanding of the use of what they call financial assurance tools. And I think what we see is that states who are exploring this want to make sure these tools are bankruptcy proof, right? They don't want an asset owner to go belly up and leave a community with a lot of panels and not being able to afford the decommissioning. So we're working with kind of state agencies in California, Minnesota, Arizona, other places to think that through. But generally, if the state allows financial assurance tools for the permitting of these kind of projects, then we can just cite that in the code. So that'd be like bonding, letters of credit, escrow accounts would also qualify, insurance, things like that.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We really appreciate you guys coming on. It's very interesting to hear about Solar Cycle and the circularity that you guys are trying to achieve. I think that we're all moving in that direction of more circular economy. And I'm really interested to see your guys' progress.
Yes, thank you. We certainly appreciate it.
Well, thanks to all of you. And we appreciate Indiana being so kind of forward thinking and wanting to hear about, issues like PFAS. I enjoyed that presentation and solar, and we look forward to working with you and figuring out a way to keep these resources out of landfills and use them again for our domestic economy. So thank you all for the important work you do.
I think that was very informative and interesting. So, next item on the agenda is to review the priorities and recycling economic impact infrastructure study recommendations. This is something that Deanna and I spoke of yesterday, and I think it's always good to go back and look at our priorities, and if we want to modify those in any way, move forward. So Deanna, do you want to take over from there?
I'm trying to switch my. Yeah, Yeah, that'd be better. Yes, this is shorter. Of course, it's I've already changed it, but it's got an activity glitch. Again, there we go. So I was just gonna go over first, I don't know how many board members were at our first strategic planning meeting with me. But at that time, we established a mission, a vision, and several areas of priorities, for the board. And then, so I'm gonna go over those, and then I was going to just, bring up a slide that shows some of the, recommendations from the infrastructure and economic impact study that we commissioned. And I had highlighted, areas of the last time we had our strategic planning around that. And I'm gonna bring up those areas again to see just how the board is feeling. I know we have a little bit of a limited time here at the end, so I don't know how far we'll get into it, but I want this to still be at our forefront for us to consider, as the next grant rounds come through. And something to, look at always, making sure that these are still our current priorities. So mission is to promote innovative projects to make Indiana a leader in recycling and waste reduction, with a vision to be a leader in innovative recycling technologies. I just thought we could remind the board with those kind of mission and vision in mind, what we've accomplished since 2008. So we funded 134 projects, awarding a total of $16.6 million, projected jobs created over 1,000, with over 1.5 million tons of waste being diverted on an annual basis. So the board priorities that were set is to divert significant tonnage of solid waste from landfills, promote curbside recycling throughout Indiana, create a better domestic market, capture more plastic material for the recycling market, analyze cost benefits of recycling to increase education efforts, encourage waste reduction in schools, focus on economic development of distressed areas in particular, and job growth, improve the management of electronic waste, develop innovative technologies, and increase awareness of recyclable items. So I think the way we could maybe open up discussion on this, even one I think that stood out to me, of course, is the encourage waste reduction in schools. This was established before the community recycling grants came back and were launched. And obviously, we've kind of went away from that in our award process. So maybe that's something that's not one of our current priorities. But there may be some other, but I think
the only reason why it's just that we're only giving by the submissions that we receive.
Right, well, eligibility, we remove schools from eligibility.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it shifted to the community grant program.
Yeah.
Because it shifted to we created its own separate one, so it's really not competing with the other one, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Just even dollar funding amounts, like we have higher dollar.
What about, would you want to say encourage waste reduction education? Encourage
right.
In their, environmental science, because it kind of sets on the bullet point one, education efforts, in market. I think the best way to help in educating the public is educating the kiddos who can go back home and tell mom and dad, hey, don't put it here, put it there. And sometimes that can kind of get the message out the best way. So I don't know. Maybe we can add education. That's a education opportunity.
Sure, and we do have education and outreach. Well, the one before it talks about education effort, increase education efforts. And
Right.
the last bullet point is, increased
Kind
awareness.
of,
So they
those
kind of have those,
three are the same thing in a different word, right?
right?
Increase awareness of recyclable items, backslash, school programs. And then you can take the school out of the bullet point. Are you looking to reduce bullet points, or are you looking to say, are these bullet points still?
This is your guys' bullet points to do with what you want.
I guess my question is, which have we succeeded in focusing on? I mean, which, out of all the grants that we've issued, which ones have we really attacked the best? Diverts significant tonnage, obviously.
Yeah.
Promote curbside recycling, yes.
Create better domestic, the top three, right? Create better, I think the two promote three, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Those build three.
Yeah.
We really haven't done a lot with organics.
But I think when we see
Plastic.
projects come in, I think they have been funded recently to a certain extent in organic.
Organic, compost.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess we have, with composting. Plastics, obviously. Cost benefits, recycling, and increased education efforts. Obviously, the electronic waste, we put a lot of effort into that. Go ahead, Debbie.
That encourage waste reduction in schools, I really think we need to take that out there. Because there's a separate area for that now. And we encourage waste reduction everywhere, not just in schools. So I think we can take that one out.
I think though, I agree. But I think on that right-hand side, bullet point 1, if you take the encourage waste reductions in schools, move the increase awareness of recyclables, and then also, like from the presentation or the I think it was, recycling partnership talked about, and I 100% agree with, is enforce education on the recyclable items, the right recycle, but also reducing contamination in streams. The higher contaminations in your streams are going to, directly impacts the abilities to create domestic, good domestic market, good quality material to send to domestic markets. It will de-incentivize curbside recycling, and it actually increases tonnage of solid waste when there's more contaminations and residual in your stream. So I think we need to really focus back on the education and contaminations with the streams. Quit the wish cycling, quit the hope cycling.
So we could probably put it all together to increase awareness of recyclable items and then,
With the reduction of contamination.
okay.
I think adding contamination, that has definitely been a more emerging concern since these were last done.
Yeah.
I would agree with Craig, and now with your long bullet point. Let's reduce
We
version.
cut it, yeah. Debbie put it about / reduce contamination. Increase awareness goes up and it replaces encourage waste reduction in schools. And then you add a / reduce contamination. Right? It's summer.
And I think that, so are we saying encourage waste reduction in schools, or are we just I think we encourage waste reduction everywhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In community.
Yeah, I think that would need
I
to
think that's
go
redundant.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And looking at the priorities, it's comforting to see that I think we've touched on many of these bullet points through the board's efforts over the last several years.
So Sandy also asked, and this is a great question. She was wondering if these priorities are all reflected in our scoring matrix. She says some are. So in the guidelines that we looked at, we do say that there are some priority materials that will have additional consideration. And I pulled those priority materials from these with the organics, the plastic, and the e-waste. So I think that's how I've addressed that in our guidelines, in our scoring. But that's a good reminder for you guys also when you're looking at the scoring and doing awards at the next board meeting, to remember those and keep those in mind.
I have a question regarding the last bullet point on the left. Capture more plastic material for the recycling market. Is that still a priority for the board? I think over the last few years, you have funded a lot of projects capturing plastic. Is plastic still a priority as a material that needs to be captured, or with the board, does the board think they should focus on a different material like glass or something, or is that still a priority? Or the material that's out there?
My 2 cents on that and great topic is, I think more and more plastics are gonna come into the market due to what manufacturers are creating. I mean, car parts and bumpers, more is made out of plastic than ever before. And if you look at kind of the manufacturers say is that there's gonna be double the amount of virgin plastic in the next 3 years coming in that's already in today. And it's just because of how light it is to transport stuff. So I think that needs to still be forefront.
But Pat, you bring up a good subject matter, glass. And the one thing that's infinitely recyclable and obviously weight-wise, it's like recycling sand. Should that be one of our priorities? We've eliminated the school education component.
You don't have to replace it.
Yeah, just for that, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we have to, I think the board has to be careful to, spread ourselves out, and spreading ourselves out too far, then priority materials don't become priority materials. It's just this recyclable materials again, right?
I think that we have funded about every glass recycling.
I think every reasonable request
Yeah.
that we've received.
I think that, I
yes.
don't think we're ignoring it because it's not this that is,
I honestly can't remember very many recent.
we did this, well. Strategic got those 30 bids.
Yes, yeah, that
And,
There's also some limiting factors with glass that we can't deal with.
yeah.
I mean, the value aspect of glass is something we can't deal with.
No, right.
Transportation and infrastructure for transportation is
Yeah.
a big issue.
And quite frankly, as I've said before, the glass manufacturers need to do a lot more than they're doing.
So I do we have some limited time to discuss these. I do want to keep moving on. So we are gonna kind of tweak encourage waste reduction, in schools to be more, just increase awareness of recyclable items and, I don't know, we'll just leave it the broad general public. We don't have to designate who.
it's the bottom one.
Right,
So.
and then add in the contamination.
Yeah, and so you can eliminate.
And then eliminate that one bullet point. Is there any others before my next slide is addressing some of those other things that were in the recommendations in the study. But I don't want to move you guys too fast. I do have copies of the full recommendations if any of you guys need to see them, but kind of put them together in a more concise manner here. So around data collection to develop a survey process for end users, around materials management planning. Their recommendation was to provide funding for zero waste, circular economy, and sustainability plans for communities. I know a couple of years back, like a lot of communities were looking to create their own plans or update plans, and I got that question a lot about whether the board should fund it. I don't think I don't even know if we have a solid answer on that, actually. Looking ahead at other recommendations around recycling processing in our MRF shed, says regional MRF shed development and support, MRF education and outreach. Around organics and food waste, we have organics recycling, including food waste. I don't know what that, I would have to actually pull up the study to read further on what that is, maybe just encouraging it more in Indiana. Of course, the board's part would be funding projects. And then public-private partnerships to utilize and promote public-private partnerships. And even around that recommendation, I think I've been trying to do that a little bit with our recycling roundtable discussions that I host, and other ways to get Indiana networking with each other and know what's here for them to be able to hopefully form those partnerships. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts. Now, of course, I think the materials management planning is even more relevant since we are creating a state materials management plan. And we are hoping to do pass-through funding once that state plan is in place, for communities to create more localized plans. I don't know if the board thoughts towards, funding, like doing cash matches, or, if we run out of funding through the Swiffer EPA for pass-through funding, would the board consider funding projects like that?
What kind of projects?
Just creating a materials management or circular or zero waste plan,
Solid waste plan.
solid waste plan. They all have.
Where would
different
our
names.
money come from? We don't
Through grant
create-
funding.
So you're saying that the grant money that would, is so the $2 million,
So there is, so our EPA Swiffer has already some, grant money that IDEM received that we're doing the state plan.
Right.
And there will be pass-through funding for communities, but it's a limited dollar amount. So if communities see others doing it and we run out of the federal funding, I was just wondering what the board's thoughts or feelings were. Just because I get that question asked every now and then too. I think that part of, climate resiliency plans that a lot of communities are doing, they have solid waste plans in conjunction with those now too. So we may see more plans coming soon to Indiana.
Unfortunately, with the monies that are assigned to us to allocate,
Yeah.
it seems like 90% of the time, we have twice the amount of viable projects than we have money.
Right.
yeah, I mean, like, I think we're getting ready to see like 17 projects that we're getting ready to see, and I think you said that it's the amount of dollars that are spent, that are asked to what we have available.
We just,
And I'm just trying to think, if, not saying that, hey, a plan's important, you gotta have a game plan before that's your strategy, but to put a plan, a piece of paper in place that trumps something that has project that's going to divert from it, that's actually gonna happen. I don't know how, I'm just trying to.
I don't know that that money should come from this board. I believe that money should come from the actual geographic area that's
Yeah.
developing the plan.
Yeah.
Or the
If you have a community developing a waste management plan,
Yeah,
then they should pay for it with their tax dollars.
yeah, yes. Better well said,
And maybe not everyone agrees. I mean, Debbie?
I agree. We've been pushing for a long time for solid waste districts to have their own plan. Some have created them, some haven't. They've not spent money on outside. Some of them have, but most of them haven't spent money on outside companies to help them create those. They've created them internally with their board and CAC and their employees, because actually they're the ones that know what need to be done. But I know that some of the bigger counties, like Lake County, that, that's a pretty big job. So.
Okay, I think we got that answer. Sandy has another question. Maybe utilizing and promoting public-private partnerships should be included in our board priorities.
So Sandy, now you're recommending replacing the school one with public-private partnership?
I just think that maybe that should be something we should have said. If someone's applying for a grant that uses a public and private partnership, that should be important. That's,
Give it an extra bonus point.
that is a good creative way to make use of resources.
Somehow we would have to identify that on our scoring sheet.
Okay, so playing devil's advocate, and yes, absolutely. Again, going back to the biggest ones that we've promoted and that we've funded is going back, I think, Deanna, you mentioned like the top one has been, carts, curbside recycling programs. If it's a curbside recycling program and it's going to the public, isn't that?
It's the definition of
That's the
a
definition of a public-private partnership, right? Yeah, so it's you're gonna have it. I mean, like, Muncie Sanitation, it's, the sanitation company giving it to the public, and they're most likely going to a MRF that's gonna sort the material to a privately held company. So in a sense, we are doing that already without saying that we are, because the second most dollars have gone to curbside recycling programs.
And many of the programs don't lend themselves.
So one example of a past grant, that how I think of public-private partnerships working for the Recycling Market Development Board is Tri-State Resource Recycling, the MRF down in southern Indiana, applied for funding for a robot. And all their 50% cash match came from Berry Global, Berry Plastics. So that's where I see, like, they're a nonprofit, public kind of MRF that received a partnership, private partnership and funding from a private company. And so it's a different perspective.
Yeah. But then, the electronics waste from home. Because where does the e-waste come from? The public, right?
I think your example, Deanna, is great, that they were able to get their cash match. And you commend them for, the ability to reach out. Oh, but I don't know that those monies, we have a part in the transaction.
Yeah.
I guess if it was a priority, it was in the guidelines or something, would you be able, like, it being said out loud, would that encourage those kinds of partnerships to occur? Or if someone applying for grant funding might be more motivated to look for, another entity to help
So
fund.
now you're asking for extended consideration because they were able to go out and acquire money from a private partner.
But they're already getting it at help. So maybe that's not something we want to consider. I'm just throwing out, this is all brainstorming.
And I don't mean to be disagreeing with you all the time.
No.
Just trying to understand.
I think it's important that it's been in there, but I think it's good where it's at.
Also, the board needs to keep in mind your main goal, basically recycling market development. Even if, for that one, would that be something that would be better? The board would still take the recommendation and move forward, but would you consider something like that more under the Central Indiana Waste Diversion dollars as opposed to the RMDP dollars? Or am I just adding more confusion? I'm sorry, I'll do
Yeah,
that.
the only thing I'd say about that is you're absolutely, the CI dollars is limited geographically.
Correct.
Yeah, if you are looking for criteria in other grant programs and other contracting programs throughout IDIM, we do like a bonus point system. So if you were looking to promote without necessarily making it a criteria, for state contracting, for instance, a veteran or minority or women-owned business, you get a bonus point for contracting with the state. You guys could make it a bonus point on top of whatever criteria you chose for grants of the next round after that, theoretically.
It's like one of the stage of the NASCAR race, right?
Yeah.
So with that said, is there any recommendations on adding points to our scoring matrix for any of these categories? I think we've done a very good job focusing on our priorities to date. And I think we can always get better, so I'm not opposed to other areas of focus. But currently, we only have 50% of the money being requested. And that's to say that all of those projects that are requesting are good projects. We don't know that as of yet. But it seems like we're always about halfway of what we need. So I don't know that I want to expand it too much.
Not yet.
But it's totally up to the board. Mr. Guerin, what's your thoughts?
Well, just seemed like we evolved, but China stopped taking our material. We as a board started concentrating more on actually funding market development related projects. A lot of them were in plastic. And at that same point, and before that, we were looking at doing more funding for educational programs, solid waste district requests. And when we started looking more at funding actual manufacturing kind of projects, then the other grant monies became available to help with the educational needs in solid waste districts. So we've kind of evolved naturally. And I think this board has done a good job in the area of looking for actual creating markets. And I think we need to continue to do that. Some of this other stuff is, we're kind of doing it tangentially without making it a priority.
Yeah.
I think the circular economy, sustainability, and all of that stuff that's evolving locally, like with Indianapolis, for instance. I just would rather not say how many go for those kinds of things.
So.
That's why we're called market development board.
You're right. What I'm hearing is that we have that one change to the priorities. And it sounds like, looking at these other recommendations, that we feel like we're kind of on the right track already, move forward as we are currently doing.
I think we've shown, and I can only speak for myself, I cannot speak for the entire board, but I feel that we've made great progress and we've made an impact in the efforts that we've put forth thus far over the last several years. And I'm glad to say I'm proud to be a part of it, working with you guys. And I commend all the board members for their effort. We're always looking for the new technology, so we know we're going to chase that and dive into it and make sure it works. So we're always looking for that, but there's so many known processes available that we can fund to expand. And when you look at a community like Indianapolis that still does not have curbside recycling, the basic recycling component, we don't need new technology.
Yeah. That's self-inflicted.
It is. Some way, somehow that message needs to get through.
Well, presentations that were done this morning, I really appreciate those because it points out that there is continually emerging new potential products. So that the market development aspects of what have been doing is going to be expanded naturally, I think, just because of more products that are on the market that are difficult to recycle. And technologies will be developed to, at some point, recycle those products. Like the solar panels, for instance, or the wind blades. So I think we're gonna have plenty of opportunities to spend money.
Yeah. Terry wants to spend more money.
I think
That could, yeah, that's a whole nother topic, cause.
Presentation by Mr. Akamoto was probably the most insightful and possibly scary presentation and challenges that we're gonna face moving forward. I mean, if you consider that everything that we water in the field is coming back and contaminating our body and our way of life, that's pretty concerning. So there's all kinds of things we can chase and tackle.
It's called acceptable collateral damage. Teflon. Bit of a good product.
Teflon was the greatest thing that ever came around when it was introduced.
And not to, this is just a side thought, but I got a letter from my insurance carrier, my commercial insurance carrier the other day that said that they would no longer cover any diseases caused by PFAS.
Really? How can you
And that
prove
was
a disease is caused by?
I don't know, but that was Wisconsin night, that, you know, that
Yeah, they're a big.
they do a lot of.
I didn't hear you, Debbie, what you said.
I said Bliss McKnight, they carried my commercial insurance, they said they would no longer cover any diseases that was caused by PFAS exposure.
Really interesting considering, statistics, reports have been out there that probably 95% of the population has PFAS in their systems.
Right.
I think we're trying to get ahead of what's gonna happen, is it, it's sitting there, but is it gonna cause any kind of illness, or just trying to get ahead of that?
But are they gonna deny claims to
Seems like it.
arbitrarily, like that.
Yeah.
Oh, you have PFAS in your snow.
Yeah, they can say what caused your illness.
Yeah.
I would think they'd have a hard time proving that it was.
Yeah.
Right? Caused by
Yeah.
PFAS.
Yeah.
Beside the point is also true.
Because that, you know, we can say everything costs it.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I think we're getting ready to.
All right, so any more discussion regarding priorities? Anybody online there? You guys are staying awake, you're doing a great job. Oh, Terry just went to sleep. All right, the next item on the agenda, the remaining 2024 schedule. Our next meeting is October 24th. Everybody make sure you mark your calendar. That will be the award meeting, is that correct, Deanna?
That's right.
That's always the exciting meeting of the year. So, other than that, the last item is, anybody else have anything they want to discuss before we adjourn? Hearing none, I guess I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Lutz, second by Mr. Guerra. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Ladies, thank you for your attendance, we appreciate it. And you can speak up more next time. And everyone here, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bruce.
To the board members and staff, particularly the ones that brought the donuts.
Thanks,
Nice work. Nice work. There's more.
Yeah.
Deanna, those were very good presentations. Thank you for pulling that together.